Okay, you're live.
Awesome. What's up, BTC? Laura Gibson at Gibson Colorist here, and today we're going to be talking all things depth and balayage. I have my gorgeous model, Penny. Penny hasn't gotten her hair colored at all since March, so I'm going to show you a way of doing a hybrid method of both balayage and foils. So whatever questions you have, go ahead, throw them in the chat. I'd love to answer anything, and let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm using around her hairline is the Joico Blonde Light Powder Lightener, and I mixed it 1:1. I like to first mix it 1:1, and then I like to add the additional developer in to the consistency that I like. I don't like it too runny when I'm foiling, so the foils don't slip. And I'm using this with the 5 volume developer. Our end goal is to still be a brunette, but have like more of a pop around the hairline and to be in that blonde category. I'm gonna show you her hair up close in 2 seconds as soon as I'm done mixing for that consistency. Do we have any questions so far?
No questions at the moment.
Awesome. Where's everybody from? All right. Cool. Now that we're all set there, I'm just going to show you real quick. Ooh. It's not too thick. It's not too loose. It's perfect for foiling. And once again, I'm using the Joico Blonde Life Powder Lightener. So I'm going to bring this in closer so you can see more of Penny's current color. I'm going to pull this out. So you can see she's got her regrowth area throughout here, and then a pretty blonde color already living throughout her mid-lengths and ends. I'm not really going to pull a lot through to her mid-lengths and ends because I want to preserve the integrity of her hair, and I'm also going to work off of a center part, so that way if she switches her part, she can wear it whichever way she wants. I think it's really important to customize color to how they actually wear their hair. All right, let's get this party started. I'm gonna swing her here. Can you see well there? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and section off along the parietal here, and I'm gonna be taking diagonal back weaves right along her hairline, and then behind her hairline, I'm gonna paint some balayage pieces just to add a little bit extra pop. There's one key area when you're doing a blonde is you don't want to over highlight in this region at all. You want to make sure that you leave depth here. So when you have your highlights laying over it, there's background there for it to pop. So I like to call it this little triangle of depth right here that you don't want any highlights to live. So you can really make that hairline piece pop. So this is a really quick, easy technique. I'm going to have you face that way again. And we're going to come in, and I'm going to go ahead and start foiling the hairline. I like anytime I'm doing foils to make sure that I have a paper thin section and that everything's nice and even. So if there's any little baby hairs, I get them out of the way now. And I'm going to come in and do my little fine weave. Since I want to add more pop along the hairline, I'm okay with pulling this foil through to the ends because there's not a lot of blonde living on it already. So I'm going to go ahead and saturate. Bring that up. I don't like to overly fold my foils. I just do 2, and then I make sure that 1 is folded in, and then I move on. This saves me time, and time is money. Honey, time is money, honey. All right, now I'm going to come right behind it, and I'm leaving about 1/4 of an inch in between these 2 foils, and now I'm going to go ahead and do 1 slice. This is going to add that extra little pop around her hairline like we were talking about. And right at the top, I'm going to feather. I'm not going to worry about creating a super harsh line there. And then as you can see on her mid-lengths here, I popped it out more, but on the ends, they're already blonde, so I don't need to touch them. So I'm just connecting that into what was previously light here. Do we have any questions yet, Rachel?
We did have a question wondering what color you're doing.
I'm creating a nice blonde that still has depth. So she'll have nice honey tones living throughout along her hairline and on her mid-lengths and ends. This will be a really seamless grow out for her again. Once again, we haven't colored it since March. And I'm using the Joico Blonde Life Powder Lightener with the 5-volume developer. I'm taking really, really thin slices right around her hairline right here to make sure it's got that extra pop right in the front. And since I'm taking such thin slices, I'm using 5-volume, which will keep the integrity of her hair. I love this lightener because the consistency is great. The lift is amazing. And it has the bonder built into it, so I don't need to worry about it really damaging the hair as I lighten. So I have one more foil on this side, and then I'm going to paint after that. And I'm only going to put in just one balayage piece right behind it, just to pop out some of those mid-lengths and ends. So here I come in again. This is another baby light slice. Now, when we talk about balancing that depth, now is when I'm really not going to bring it up higher. So as I work my way further back, I'm leaving more and more space at the top. This is creating that balayage lived-in look. All right, now I'm done foiling there. I'm going to drop this down. I'm going to take a look at where her pre-existing highlights are living, and I'm going to come in right behind the highlights. Like I said, we're leaving that pocket of depth here, and I'm just going to pop out the mid-lengths and ends in this little area. I'm still going to use my same formula because there's already blonde living here. I don't need to use a high developer, and her hair is porous, so it's going to lift very easily. It's also fine in texture. So now when I'm painting this, because I want it to be like a nice thin highlight at the top and then come into this bolder pop, I'm going to control how much product I pick up. So it's this little tiny bit as I work this top part. It's going to be a tiny little baby light. And then I'm going to overlap it onto the previous blonde just to kind of pop it out a little bit more. And then I'm done with this area of the head completely. Perfect. Boom. I'm gonna just go ahead and let you guys see what that looks like. So we have 4 foils and a very, very fine baby light balayage right there. This is gonna build out that pop. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and adjust this even more. Are you guys able to see, or do I need to move at all? This is one trick I have. Like, I kind of like to pre-section out the hairline so I know while I'm working where I need to stop at. When I look at Penny, go ahead and look straight for them and then tilt your head down slightly. The one thing I notice is like where the drop is on Penny, it's right about here. So I'm going to go ahead and section off that area so I know anything past that, I'm no longer in that money zone for her money piece. All right. So it breaks down to this little rectangle, which looks like it's only about a little less than an inch thick. I'm going to come in here. Now, here's the other thing too. When it comes to hairlines, you need to make sure that you cater. Her hairline kind of drops in over here, so I don't need to worry about trying to pick up these tiny baby hairs. We're going for blonde, not for blonde. So those hairs won't matter. Now, as you can see, I only have this much that needs to be touched up from her previous appointment. So I'm going to switch my foils. I like to create these little baby foils anytime I'm working and I'm just retouching so I don't overlap. And also, this is such a fine area of hair around the hairline that I don't want the foil to be so heavy that it causes slippage. No one has time for beads. Can I get an amen? I'm going to push the previous off to the side, fold that up, and boom. Now I'm going to move right behind it. I'm going to take another little slice of heaven. And now I'm going to do another little tiny thin slice off of that. And same thing that I just did. Making sure that I'm only touching it up.
So we do have some questions.
Awesome. What's up?
We had one wondering, are you pushing product all the way through on baby light balayage?
No, I am not. I'm just feathering that along the top. Like, so as you can see, she already has some pre-existing blonde here. And I just want to pop that out a little bit much because you can tell, a little bit more, excuse me, because you can tell that she's been in water, a little bit of chlorine, so it kind of has like a buildup on it. So I'm just using that to gently kind of get off that buildup and to make it bright again. Excellent question. So it's still living on the surface, and I'm using that same formula, which is the Joico Blonde Life Powder Lightener with the 5-volume developer. And you can see how thin these slices are around her hairline. What other questions do we have, Rachel?
We did have a question wondering what her natural base is.
She is naturally a level 5. She's got kind of the perfect base color for this kind of look. All right, now as I work towards the back of her hair, I'm just gonna start weaving in this area. So that way we go from a little bit more pop into something more subtle before we start her baby balayage behind it. And this is the same application I used on her the last time, so we're really touching it up. This is super salon friendly. Like I said, we haven't done this since the middle of March, so that's what? We're almost in October. 6+ months since I've touched her color at all. And then she had a pre-existing lob, so the last time I saw her, she didn't want it cut at all, so she hasn't even gotten her hair cut since November. So when I'm done doing this, we're going to trim it up because she's growing it back out from that lob collarbone length. All right, so we have 4 foils again. It's 3 slices into 1 weave, and now I'm gonna let out this other hair, and I'm gonna paint the baby balayage again. I really like where these highlights are grown out too, so I'm not gonna worry about touching up into this area. That's how we're talking about the balancing of depth in this kind of application. You wanna go based off of what's already existing. You don't want to overcomplicate things for yourself where you're highlighting and then adding a root shadow. It's just making an adjustment to what's already living on her color. It's being a little bit more present. So I'm going to grab this one little piece and I'm going to pop it out again. I'm going to load my board. So this is a perfect application. Like, is anyone out there that doesn't already balayage where they feel a little intimidated to balayage? If that's you, this is the perfect technique to kind of get your feet wet with balayage. You got those coils around the hairline and you're practicing right behind it. If it doesn't get overly blonde, it's okay because that's not the look you're going for with this technique. This is about balancing the depth and keeping the natural for a really seamless grow out and low maintenance color for your client. Now, in this top section, I'm going to add one more baby light right behind it just to pop that out more. Once again.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. What's up, Rachel?
We do have a question. Wondering, did you do back-to-back at the hairline?
I did not do back to back. There's a slight space in between the foils. I can show you how much space exactly. Do you guys want to see that? A little bit more up close. All right. So I'm going to gently lift this, and you can see it's like about 1/8 of an inch in between each foil along the hairline. Once again, we want to leave that depth. This is all about balancing depth within your balayage. It's not about overly highlighting and then having to go back through with a root melt. The last time I did her color, we didn't even have to do a root melt because the placement on it was so seamless and soft. It looked beautiful. All I had to do was an overall universal gloss for the tonality. Bring this down a little bit more. Ooh. You guys okay? Sorry about that. The tripod fell. All right, so once again, I'm working off this pre-existing highlights, and I'm gonna still keep that nice diagonal with it when I paint in these balayage pieces. So it's gonna go from being all the way up to the top to here, to here, to here, creating that nice, beautiful balayage throwout, balancing that depth. And for you, for those of us who are just joining, I'm using the Joico Blonde Life Powder Lightener and 5-volume developer. I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna grab this little piece. Now, I'm gonna leave this area out completely because I need that depth between the two highlights. I'm gonna come right behind it and pop it out. So this needs to be super controlled when I paint this. Don't breathe. Just kidding. Just kidding. Did everyone have a good weekend? I hope so. All right, now I'm pulling through to those ends, and I'm gently going to lift this up so you can see what it looks like on the underneath. In this area, she was like a little bit darker, so I need to make sure I balance out this area by making this more saturated right here. Balayage is supposed to be customized to the area you're working on. So as you lift this up, if you see anything, gently soften it out. So I see this guy, I'm just gonna wipe it off. And then everything else looks nice and balanced. There's no harsh line living under here. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop that. And I'm gonna add one more baby light behind it. Do we have any questions, Rachel?
Yes, we did have a couple questions asking why you chose the volume you did and what the final level of the hair will be.
I chose the volume I did because the hair that's in the foil is going to have the incubation and saturation from the heat, that it's going to be able to get to the same level of lift as this. And also this is a freehand balayage application over here. So since it's not a super fine section, it's a larger section, it's not being saturated completely through to the other side. Using 5 volume will even that out. So overall, she'll be living at about like an 8.5, 9 for her total look. It'll be basically like a nice honey blonde. I'm just popping out what's already light. That's why I'm using 5 volume. If I would use a volume that was higher than that on this balayage, it would compromise the integrity of her hair. And to be honest, it's not necessary because this still has to sit. This is just kind of shifting the blonde that's already existing and giving it a little bump. All right, so we're done with this side. Ooh, baby. All right, I'm gonna spin her a little bit. So as you can see, she's got this nice depth living through here and these like soft little pops that are gonna help add a little bit more accent throughout her color. And we'll have more definition along here with the highlight at her hairline. I'm gonna go ahead and switch sides. All right, so my first section, once again, is gonna be exactly how I did on the other side. I'm gonna section along the parietal ridge. We're gonna pre-section this off because we're not gonna work on it. And I'm gonna add those 4 foils here and then paint that one nice little balayage baby light behind to pop out that old color. And you guys can kind of see how here she lifted a little bit more and here she didn't lift as much. So by me using 5 volume, this is basically gonna have this lift to what this already was lifted to. So we're balancing this out and adding a little bit more pop throughout her mid-lengths and ends. So the first foil, we do a nice little soft baby light. The other thing too is like I on both sides leave this region a little bit darker so I don't wash her out with her complexion. She needs a little bit of contouring, otherwise it's going to open up her face too much and she's going to look more like a blonde. And we don't want blonde, we want blonde here in this situation. Do you have any other questions?
Yes, so we are getting quite a few comments from people saying that they are intimidated by balayage and wondering if you have any tips about placements and getting more comfortable with it.
I have a lot of tips. If you're intimidated by balayage, start with brunettes. Brunettes, you don't need to worry about the lift being super, super blonde, you know, and also reds because you're just lifting to copper. So that would be a good place to start as far as like colors go. Starting with a blonde, you have to worry about a few more things like making sure it lifts enough. And the lift is really going to be from saturation. Balayage can definitely be intimidating at first. I'll never forget my first balayage. I cried in the break room because I was so embarrassed. That was about 10 years ago. I took tons and tons of classes on balayage, and I practice a lot. That's the one thing I will say. If you don't practice what you learn, you will lose it. So whatever class you take, if you don't go home and start practicing it right away, you're never actually going to get it because our craft is hands-on. It's not like a thing where you take a written test on something. You have to physically do it. And the more you do something, the more comfortable you get at it. I actually have a balayage certification program launching in 2023 with Joico, and it's going to literally be like three different classes. And if you've never balayaged, it's the perfect thing to not only teach you how to balayage, but it's also really going to teach you the why behind it. So you're not just going to learn a technique, you're going to learn exactly what effect creates what. So you can alter that based off of the client, based off of what their end result is. And you can really become a master at balayage. So you guys should definitely check it out. It's going to be at the Joico Academy, and we're launching it in 2023. And I've taken into consideration like every level of balayage. So it's like the beginners, the intermediates, and the experts. Everyone's going to be able to learn something from this class, especially in the second series, which is going to be balayage versus hair painting. And it's going to show you the different effects that each one creates and how you can use them also together, but also separately. So if you're interested in learning more, you're definitely going to want to check that out. I'll be announcing stuff on my Instagram for that. And you can follow me at Gibson Colorist. I have tons of balayage videos if you're intimidated balayage and you want to see more after this. I have tutorials that really help with that. All right, so I'm on my third foil. Also, when you're first starting out with balayage, a technique like this is the perfect technique to practice with because you have those foils around your hairline, which kind of act as like a little security blanket for you, and then you're painting behind it. The one thing I will say is if I were to balayage up into the brown area of her hair, I would 100% have to change my volume. I wouldn't be able to use the 5 volume like I'm using right now. And that's because this area is much, much darker than this area. So I need more levels of lift in order for here to match here. All right, I'm on my last foil, and then I'm going to paint in my little baby light. What do you guys think of this technique so far? Do we have any more questions, Rachel?
We did have a question from earlier wondering how is the bleach not bleeding onto the other hairs?
Because it's not on the other side. It's just a surface highlight. You'll be able to tell. I'm going to post her after photo on my Instagram story at Gibson Colorist, and I'll make sure to be able to show you guys on her mid-lengths and ends so you can tell that it's not going to bleed. It's really just like a very delicate painting on top to really pop these out. Perfect. I'm going to move that there so you guys can see a little bit better. How's the positioning of the camera? Are you guys able to see this? Rachel, are you able to see what I'm doing well, or am I blocking at all?
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. All right, so on this side, I'm gonna pick up a little bit thicker of a piece because I'm balancing it out to the other side. That's another thing too. Anytime you're doing someone's hair color, not everything is always symmetrical, so you might need to tweak things on one side to balance it to make it as close as symmetrical as possible. So paying attention to what's previously living and just making those tweaks really helps with that. All right, so I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna pop out that, leaving that nice depth at the top and through this highlight. What other comments are we getting, Rachel?
We do have a couple people saying that they feel like they struggle with placement the most on the back of the head.
Okay, I can show you when I'm done painting this how I go about that. When I'm done with her whole head. This is technically just a partial application because we're doing placement in very impactful areas. We don't even need to worry about the back because of what's pre-existing, but I would show you how I would paint the back. I wouldn't even foil anything back here. I would freehand paint that whole thing. That's gonna give it a super seamless, soft grow out. So I'm gonna do exactly what I did on the other side here. I'm gonna first pre-section off that hairline with that little rectangular area, and we're gonna put in about 4 foils here. And then we're gonna paint in the 2 subsections behind it. Once again, as you notice here, we have that little area where the hairline goes in. We're not gonna worry about that. This is a blonde, not a blonde. And I'm gonna go back to using my little baby foils because this is just a touch up along these hairline pieces. So I'm not pulling anything to her mid-lengths and ends. That's a little thing I've learned over the years is if the foil is too heavy, it can slip, especially when there's not a lot of hair being put into the foil. So to prevent that from happening, I like to make these little baby foils where I cut the foil in half. These are just the Framar pop-up foils cut in half, so I don't need to worry about the hairline slipping. Nothing's worse than bleeds. Coming right behind it. And it's the same thing in this area. It's still a little bit more coming into her hairline. We're not going to worry about it just yet. But now I'm actually going to slice right behind this guy so I can get a little bit more definition along her hairline for this look. Do you guys have any questions? I can't actually see your chat, so if you have questions, Rachel is DJing your questions to me.
We did have a question from somebody wondering if you were still using the 5 volume.
I am still using the 5 volume. It hasn't bumped up yet. So, it hasn't been long enough for me to want to switch. This is a super simple, impactful placement. This is something that behind the chair should take you about 20 minutes to do. If I wasn't explaining this, I would actually already be done with this technique.
We also had a question wondering why you don't use heat.
The foil is working as heat. And see how thin this slice is? The saturation of the product is all I really need. I personally don't like to put my clients under heat because under heat, the products can swell sometimes, lighteners, and that's all lighteners universal, where I don't want any of those problems with it. So I personally don't like to put anything under heat. It also really opens the cuticle, and then sometimes the cuticle is harder to close with it, and that's mainly the reason why I don't like to. Because if the cuticle doesn't close down, even when I'm trying to tone the hair, sometimes it takes longer for the tone to actually take because the cuticle's so blasted open from the heat. It's a lightener. You don't need heat in order for it to lighten. I find if you're having issues with lift, majority of the time it's you didn't pick the right developer or you took too thick of a section and you didn't saturate it enough. So I noticed on this one, I need to readjust and add a little bit more hair to it because it's going to be too close of a highlight. So I'm just going to adjust that, straighten it out a little bit more, and then come in and do my baby light slice. I like to think of heat when I'm doing hair color. Like if you think of the outer layer of the cuticle being the door to the inside of the hair, when you're using heat, you're kicking the door in. And the more you kick a door in, the more it starts to fall off the hinges, right? Versus when you nicely open a door, the door will stay on its hinges longer and last longer, if that makes sense. So that's also why I personally don't like to use heat, or maybe that's an analogy that helps you visualize what heat does when you use it when it comes to a lightener. I absolutely love the Blonde Life powder lightener. It does exactly what it says it's going to do. It has the bonder, so it's nice. It keeps the strength of the hair as you're lightening. And if I use a higher developer on darker hair, I'm really able to get the lift. It's perfect if you need that platinum blonde. And if you don't want platinum blonde, you just use a lower developer. All right. So we're completely done with all of the hairline. Now we're taking that top subsection and we are just cutting this in half. I like to keep my sectioning simple when it comes to placement. So for this exact reason, it makes an easy touch up. The faster you're doing touch up highlights, the more clients you're able to take, and the more clients you're able to take, the more money you're able to make. And I don't know about you, but I like vacations. All right, so I'm going to take this little guy and I'm going to leave that negative space here. So this is where I'm balancing that depth. If I were to add a highlight, if I were to balayage up into this area, it would be way too close to the foiled highlights. So I'm going to leave this depth here and just paint behind it. So it's pretty visual.
So we did get a question wondering what mistakes should we avoid while doing balayage?
Ooh, I would say that watch, like what you paint is what you're going to see. So how you paint it is how it's going to turn up. A lot of times people like to overly grab product off their board and then it's a lot harder to get like a nice fine painting. I like to control everything I pick up off the board. So like as you see, I have this tiny little product on the edge of the board, on the edge of the brush, and that's what I'm going to use to paint with. So coming behind that, painting with that, I'm able to control everything. Where if I was just not paying attention to what I pick up off the board and like I just went like that and I tried to paint this really fine line, it's going to be a lot harder to paint because I don't have that control of the product. So the more control of the product you have, the better outcome you have. So I would say control your product and keep it clean. The cleaner it is as you paint, the cleaner your end result is as well. And when you're saturating, think of it as like you're icing a cake. If the cake looks white and you can't see the cake, if the icing is all white and frosted and you can't see the cake, you have even saturation. But if there's an area where you can, kind of see the cake, not see the cake, kind of see the cake, in terms of balayage, where you don't have as much saturation, you're not going to get as much lift. So if you need that even lift, you need to make sure it looks painted evenly. What other questions do you guys have?
Well, we did have a question from somebody who always seems to get brassy and how they can avoid this prior to toning. Also, they were wanting to have the camera move down a little so they could see your painting better.
Is that better? Hold on. There you go.
Yes.
Is that better? Mm-hmm. I know it's kind of hard when you're being the camera guy and the painter at the same time. Okay, so the question is how they can avoid brassiness. I would say up your developer. Brassiness comes from either your lightener's not strong enough or you didn't saturate the hair as much. So making sure you're using the proper developer really, really helps with that. So as you guys can see, she's got a nice balance of depth here and here. I always leave this little area out behind because she's supposed to be a blonde, not a blonde. And like we said, we're balancing depth here today. So it's where what you don't paint that means the most in this kind of application. So we're on the top section of the hair. I'm gonna reload my board real quick before I drop this down in section. That's gonna help it easier for me to pre-section her a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna take a look at what's already living, and I need to take this little piece right here. And looking at our pre-existing highlight, I need to just come down the middle and pop this out behind it. So paying attention to what's already living is gonna help really ensure that I get the placement I really want on this kind of look. If you haven't tried the Joico powder lightener and you're having issues with the hair not lifting enough, I really suggest that you try that lightener. And you can use it with either 5 volume, 10 volume, 20 volume with the Joico developers. You can do the Lumishine developers or the brand new coconut developers if they're in your stores. I personally love the coconut developer. It helps really condition the hair as it lightens. All right, so there's one little bead right there, and then I'm just gonna paint right behind it. I'm gonna pick up this little hair. And since I didn't add any highlight here, now I'm gonna add the highlight there, and I'm gonna leave this little background out behind it. Or actually, you know what? Looking where it falls, I am gonna add a little there, but this entire mid area is gonna be left out. So coming up here, painting that little baby light. Do you have any questions, Rachel? I heard you come in.
Sorry about that.
No, you're
yes, good. We did have a couple people wondering what toner are you ending with on her?
I'm going to use the new Blonde Life toner. I'm going to do the 10N and mix it equal parts with the 8N Blonde Life. It's new. And those are like quick toners, so they're not really meant to sit on for a full 20 minutes. You can if you really have to cancel out warmth, but I'm just going to use equal parts of 10N and 9N. 10N and 8N to create 9N with the coconut 5 volume developer from Joico. All right, so I'm all done with the front of her head. Now I'm going to go ahead and flip her to the back, so you guys can see how I'm going to address the back. Now for the back, this is how her color is going to go. It's high up here, a little lower, a little lower, a little lower. Now in the back, it's going to be a little lower. This is creating all of that depth and really balancing your color. So leaving more out back here, especially since she already has that lightness I want. This look isn't supposed to be blonde. It's supposed to be blonde. So we need that depth in order for the blonde pieces that I'm highlighting to really pop. So I'm going to load my board real quick, and I'm going to come in. This is left out so these two won't touch, but also to ensure that these two aren't going to touch and create one big blob in this area, I'm going to paint on the left side of the hair. So leaving that right side out is going to really act as the depth. Making sure I'm not going higher than this point right here. This is how you get that nice little drop into the back. Popping out the mid-lengths and ends. This doesn't look even, so I'm going to go back over it. Notice that my board is always moving when I'm painting. And then I'm going to spin her a little bit more again so you guys can see. I'm going to take a look at how it's living and how it's laying. Obviously, I need to add a piece right here and a piece right there. So all I have to do is actually pick up this little section next to it, like so. I'm going to smooth that out. And now I'm going to paint a double point, making sure I leave space in between this highlight. So coming on the left side and then onto the right side, making sure I'm not creating any harsh lines this way with how I insert these points. So this is keeping it really soft and smooth. And now making sure that I saturate more on the mid-lengths and ends back here, because these mid-lengths and ends are darker than the front. So see that, how that looks white like a birthday cake? That icing, that frosting looks so good. And then I'm just gonna add one more highlight right here. And then we are totally done with this look. What questions or comments do you guys have about this?
So we did get a comment saying, I can't get past the red coppery level 6-7 tones to save my life, just trying to get a nice level 5 tone. Would you suggest the Joico line for this?
I'm so sorry you broke up, Rachel. Can you repeat the question for me?
Yes, we had somebody saying that they can't get past a red coppery level 6 or 7 to save their life, and they're just trying to get a nice level 5-6, and they were wondering if you'd suggest the Joico line for that.
I absolutely would suggest trying the Joico Blonde Life, really any of the Blonde Life lighteners. There's a powder, there's a paste one. They all are amazing when it comes to lift. Like I'm using 5 volume on her entire head and I'm not gonna have that brassiness. You'll be able to see in her afters, but you can also see on what's pre-existing on her hair because I'm just touching up what I already did. And on her last appointment, I used the Joico Blonde Life Powder Lightener with 5 volume. So you can already see here how it lightens perfectly. I'm gonna get it a little bit closer. Can you guys see? She's got that nice honey tone. So the last time I touched this, or the last time I did this technique, I used the Joico Powder Blonde Life and I used it with the 5 volume. So as you can see, it lightens beautifully. It gets that lift that you really need, but make sure that your sections aren't too thick. Because if you're taking these really, really thick sections, even if it's in foil and you're not saturating enough, you're always gonna have an issue with lift. Another suggestion I would have is if you're taking thicker sections, go up higher on your developer. So that way you can really get that lift you need. What other questions do you guys have?
We also had a question wondering if you mix your product thicker for balayage versus foil highlights.
So a general rule of thumb I have for balayage is that I want it to be like sour cream or Greek yogurt consistency. So it's not too thick and it's not too loose of a consistency. It's like a perfect smooth, it glides on really, really nicely. What other questions?
Yes, so we also had a question wondering how long it took for you to get confident with doing these techniques and knowing when to do weaving and slicing and placement and that sort of thing.
The more classes I took, but not only the more classes I took, the more I practiced the classes I went to. Like I'll never forget, I spent all this money on going to a certification class and I learned all this stuff. And I was too nervous to use it right when I got back into the salon, and I didn't practice anything I had learned in that certification program. And it wasn't until I actually started really doing it that I got really good at it. So I would say take as many classes and practice the classes that you take. And the more you do that, the more confident you'll get. I've been a colorist for 16 years. So I would say it takes you 10,000 hours to master anything. Don't beat yourself up. Just really practice, 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 and you'll be able to really become an expert at placement and at knowing when and why you're going to do things. A lot of times what we don't realize too is like the hair density and the hair texture will also dictate how your placement's going to look. So knowing when to alter placement based off of the texture and the density will be super, super key in your career.
Awesome. Yeah, we had one other question. Do you not do any lightening underneath in the back?
No. So when we were talking about like this whole technique is for balancing depth. I find that most hairdressers will go through and they'll overly lighten hair versus lightening the most impactful areas. This is supposed to be a blonde with that nice pop around her hairline. I don't want her to look blonde all throughout. So by addressing the underneath where she already has pre-existing blonde in there, I don't need to add any more highlights. Great question though. What other questions do you guys have?
I am not seeing any other recent questions, but we do have a lot of people thanking you for taking the time to do this class and answer questions for them.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope I was able to answer all your questions efficiently. And if you have any more, you can hit me up on Instagram. It's at Gibson Colorist. And I'm really good at talking about hair. I'm super nerdy. I love it. But I really want to thank you guys for joining me today. And I hope you were able to take away as much as you could from this. And if you want to see the end result, don't forget to check it out at L Gibson Colorist or on the Joico page. It'll be in the stories. Thank you for joining me. Bye.